Al-Aqsa Flood ay nag-umpisa sa pagpasok ng halos 1,000 militante sa teritoryo ng Israel. Kasabay ng pagpaulan nila ng libo-libong rockets, ay agad nilang sinira ang mga border fence at paggamit ng mga paragliders upang makapasok, at nang nasa loob na sila ay walang habas na pumatay ng daang-daang mga sibilyan at sundalo at kumuha ng dose-dose ng mga hostages pabalik sa Gaza. Noong 1948, Arab-Israeli war pa ang huling malaking pag-ataking ganito na naganap sa loob mismo ng Israel. Sinabi ng Hamas na ang pag-atake ay kabayaran para sa pagpapahirap ng Israel sa mga tao sa Gaza at paglapastanganan sa Al-Aqsa Mosque sa Jerusalem. Ang Hamas ay unang nabuo noong 1987 sa tinatawag na First Intifada, ang unang uprising ng mga Palestinians kontra sa Israel. Sa galit nila dala ng opresyon, pang-aagaw ng kanilang mga tirahan at pananakot, nagkaroon ng malawakang street protests ang mga Palestinians, at kasabay na malaking kaguluhang ito ay ang pag-usbong ng Hamas. Sina Sheikh Ahmed Yassin at Abdelaziz al-Rantisi ang mga unang nagtatag ng Hamas. Si Yassin, na kilalang mahusay at charismatic na leader, ang nag-provide ng spiritual at ideological foundation ng grupo. Ang kanyang ideya na isang independent Islamic state para sa mga Palestino ang naging selling point upang makakuha ng suporta ang Hamas sa masa. Samantalang si al-Rantisi naman, na isang medical doctor, ang nag-ambag ng kanyang organizational skills at strategic mindset upang makabuelo ang grupo sa umpisa. Ang salitang Hamas ay mismong isang acronym para sa Harakat al-Muqawama al-Islamiyah, Arabic para sa Islamic Resistance Movement. Ang grupo, tulad ng karamihan ng mga paksyon ng Palestinian at partidong pampolitika, ay ginigiit na ang Israel ay isang salot na sumasakop, at sila di umano ang puwersa na lalaban sa salot upang palayain ng mga Palestinians. Itinuturing nito ang Israel bilang hindi isang lehitimong estado. Hindi tulad ng iba pang mga paksyon ng Palestinians, tumanggi ang Hamas na makipag-ugnayan sa Israel. Noong 1993, tinutulan nito ang Oslo Accords, isang kasunduan sa kapayapaan sa pagitan ng Israel at ng Palestine Liberation Organization o PLO sa pamumuno ni Yasser Arafat para sa pagtatag ng independenteng estado ng mga Palestinians sa tabi ng Israel. Mula 1993, lalo pang naging popular ang pangalan ng Hamas sa masa ng mga Palestino dahil sa mga social services na kanilang pinatupad sa larangan ng libreng edukasyon, healthcare at welfare sa mga Palestinians. Ngunit sa likod nito ay mga sekretong pag-aalsa, pambobomba at pang-blackmail ang ginagawa ng Hamas laban sa gobyerno at mamamayan ng Israel. Dahil sa maraming pag-atake ng naturang grupo, itinilaga sila bilang isang teroristang organisasyon ng Estados Unidos, European Union at mismong Israel. Ang US State Department na noon ang nagsabi na ang Hamas ay tumatanggap ng pondo, armas at pagsasanay mula sa Iran. Ayon sa Pangulo ng Ministry of Defense ng Israel na si Yoav Gallant, na ang Iran ay nagbibigay sa Hamas ng aabot sa $100 million taon-taon upang panggastos nito sa kanilang operasyon laban sa Israel. Kaya nakakabili ito ng mga rockets, mga gamit at mga high-powered weapons na ginamit nila sa pag-atake sa Israel itong nakaraang mga araw. 2014 pa ang huling malaking pagkilos ng Hamas sa pagdukot ng 3 Israeli teenagers na naging minsan ng 7 linggong bakbakan. Ngunit ano nga ba ang dahilan ng bigla ang malaking pag-atake ng Hamas ngayong matagal na itong nanahimik? Ayon sa mga eksperto, isang malaking dahilan ay upang maibalik at maging mainit muli ang issue tungkol sa pang-aapi ng Israel sa mga Palestino na natatabunan sa usapin ng peace process na pinamumunuan ng Saudi Prince na si Mohammed bin Salman noong nakaraang buwan, na naglalayong kilalanin sa unang pagkakataon ng mga Arab countries ang State of Israel at magtatag ng magandang ugnayan sa nasabing estado. Ang relasyong Saudi-Israel ay maaaring maging isang mahalagang sandali para sa pagiging lehitimo ng Israel sa rehiyon dahil maaari itong mag-udyok sa ibang mga bansang Muslim na sumunod. Taliwas ito sa pangako dati ng Saudi Arabia na hindi kikilalanin ng Israel hanggat hindi nito binibigyan ng kalayaan ng mga Palestinians. Kaya ang layunin sa biglang pag-atake ng Hamas ay upang ibalik ang atensyon sa usaping Israeli-Palestinian conflict, at dagdag pa ng mga eksperto, sila nga ay nagtagumpay sa kanilang layunin na ito sa pag-atake nitong October 7. Isa pang dahilan ay maaaring nagpapakitang gilas rin ng grupo sa kakayanan ng puwersa nito pagdating sa pakpakan. Isang malaking sampal nga naman sa mukha ng Israeli Military at Intelligence Unit ang kapalpakan nilang maipagtanggol ng kanilang mga mamamayan at hindi matiktikan ang plano ng Hamas. Ang Hamas ay naghatid ng isang suntok sa Israel na higit sa kung ano ang nakasanayan nito, sabi ni Omar Rahman, isang miyembro ng Middle East Council on Global Affairs na nakatutok sa mga kaganapan sa pagitan ng Israel at Palestine. Ang ginawa nilang surprise attack ay tila isang deklarasyon na dapat maseryosohin ng international community ang kanilang kakayahan, sabi ni Rahman. Ayon sa mga opisyal ng Israeli military noong unang araw ng pag-atake, na kinuha ng Hamas ang dosena ng mga hostages. Ngunit sinabi ng Hamas na ang dinukot nito ay aabot sa 100 katao at karamihan sa mga ito ay mga sibilyan. Isa raw itong trademark ng Hamas na dati na rin nandukot ng mga hostages upang iswap sa paglaya ng mga miyembro nito na kasalukuyang nakakulong sa loob ng Israel. Para makita ng buong mundo ang kanilang operasyon, nagkabit pa ng mga GoPro ang kanilang mga miyembro na naka-uniforme ng mga komandos habang niraratrat at dinudukot ng mga sibilyan sa isang music festival na puno ng sayawan at kabataang nagpa-party. Malinaw na gusto ng Hamas ng atensyon at publicity. Bukod sa pananakot sa Israeli public tungkol sa kanilang bagsik, nagsisilbi rin ng mga videos na ito na kasangkapan upang lalo silang suportahan ng mga Palestinians. Nagigil rin sa pang-aapi at pagnanakaw di umano ng Israel ng kanilang homeland. Gustong i-project ng Hamas na sila ang savior ng mga aping Palestinians at hindi sila nagkamali sa suportang binibigay sa kanila ng mga tao ng Gaza. Sa kabilang banda naman ay ang tanong na ngayong ginalit nila ang Israel at nag-declare ito ng all-out war, kakayanin kaya ng Hamas ang malakas na puwersang paparating sa kanila? Sa tingin ng iba ay matagal nang naghahanda ang Hamas ng all-out offensive laban sa kanila ng Israel. At dahil malakas ang loob nito, hindi malayong may malaking bansa na sumusuporta nito at ayon sa spekulasyon, ito ay walang iba kundi ang bansang Iran. Hindi kasi sang-ayon ang Iran sa balak ng ibang Middle Eastern countries na makikipagkaibigan sa Israel. Bukod sa Iran, umaasa rin ang Hamas na mag-aaklas ang mga mamamayan ng Gaza, Jerusalem, West Bank at mga Arab-Israelis na sumusuporta sa Hamas maging mga militante sa Southern Lebanon. Ayon sa pahayag ng senior Hamas official na si Saleh al-Aruri, handa raw sila sa worst case scenario. Kasama na rito ang isang malakihang ground invasion upang magkaalaman na kung sino talaga ang mananalo once and for all sa labang ito. Ito ay sa kabila ng malayong agwat sa firepower ng dalawang panig, bukod pa sa suporta ng Estados Unidos sa Israel na nag-umpisa na magpadala ng kanilang military assets sa lugar. Matatanda ang pinagtulong-tulungan ng Israel ng ilang Arab countries sa kinagurihang Six-Day War at lumabas pa rin ito panalo. Ang masaklat nga lang, sa ginawang walang habas na counter-offensive ngayon ng Israel, gamit ng kanilang superior firepower, maraming sibilyan ang madadamay at binabugian ng buhay sa loob ng Gaza. Isang halimbawa na lang ay ang airstrike na ginawa ng Israeli Air Force sa bahay ng kapatid ng isang Hamas leader na si Mohammed Dave na tumakos ng buhay ng kapatid nito, ngunit nadamay ang dalawa nitong anak at iba pa mga kapitbahay na walang koneksyon sa Hamas. Gayon din ang sinapit ng mga residential na gusali na ginawang kuta ng ilang opisyal ng Hamas. Nakitang-kitang pinulbos ng airstrike ng Israel. Ngunit katumbas dito ay buhay ng halos 200 sibilyan. Wala nang may tatag ang Hamas. Naging busy rin ng Israeli Mossad sa naging pusa at laga ng habulan upang isa-isang pitasin ng mga lider ng Hamas. Noong 1997, gamit ang isang nerve agent, inangka nilang lasunin sa bali ng Amman, Jordan ng isang Hamas high-ranking official na si Khaled Mishal. Sa kasamaang palad, kahit natagumpay nilang nalaso ng target, nabuking naman ng mga Jordanian police ang dalawang Mossad secret agents at naaresto. Napilitan tuloy ang Israel na i-release sa kulungan ang doon nakakulong na Hamas leader na si Sheikh Ahmed Yassin, kapalit ng dalawa nilang secret agents, at ibigay rin sa Mossad ang antidote o gamot sa lason na nasa katawan na ni Khaled Mishal. Kaya siya ay nakarecover. Ngunit umpisa lamang ito sa mga handang gawin ng Mossad upang huntingin ng mga leader ng Hamas. Noong March 22, 2004, habang papunta sa isang moske, kasama ang kanyang mga bodyguards, si Sheikh Ahmed Yassin na noong naka-wheelchair na ay sapul ng isang missile mula sa isang Israeli helicopter gunship na kanyang ikinamatay kasama ng dalawa niyang bodyguards at 6 na sibilyan. Marihing kinundina ng mga Palestinians ang kanyang pagkamatay at umabot sa 200,000 ang umaten sa kanyang libing. Dahil dito, naiwan na lang si Al-Rantisi bilang leader at spokesperson ng Hamas. Ngunit pagsapit ng April 17 ng taon yun, wala pang isang buwan matapos mapatay si Yassin, pinaulanan siya ng Hellfire missiles mula sa isang AH-64 Apache helicopter ng Israel. Tila tinupad nito ang kanyang hiling dahil sa isang interview noong 1998, tinanong si Al-Rantisi kung takot ba siya sa kamatayan. Ang sabi niya kapag sinalin sa Tagalog ay, takot ako kapag dahil ito sa sakit. Kaya mas gugustuhin ko pang mamatay sa pag-atake ng isang Apache helicopter kaysa mamatay sa heart attack. At ito nga ang kanyang sinapit. Sa pagkawala ng dalawang orihinal na leader, ipinasa ika nga ang baton sa mga leaders na sila Ismail Haniyeh at Khaled Mishal. na siyang lalong nagpalawig sa pakikipag-alyansa ng Hamas sa iba't ibang mga grupo na hindi sang-ayon sa Israel sa mga karatig bansa nito. Fast forward noong 2010, isang senior military commander ng Hamas ang tinarget na naman ng Mossad sa isang mitikuloso at tagumpay na operasyon sa Dubai. Habang nasa bakasyon, walang kamalay-malay si Mahmoud al-Mabu na mga Mossad agents na pala ang mga kapwa niya turista sa hotel na nakadamit pa ng pang-tennis at nakasalubong niya ito sa lobby ng hotel. Ngunit sa kanyang muling pagpasok sa kwarto, ay sinundan siya ng mga ito at tahimik na tinapos sa kanyang buhay sa pamamagitan ng paglason, pagkuryente at pagtakip ng unan sa mukha. Pagsapit ng 2017, isang Palestinian engineer at di umano'y opisyal ng Hamas ang binaril sa Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia nang walang ebidensya at suspect man lang na nakilala. Ayaw magsalita ng Mossad tungkol sa insidente, pero sa isip ng Hamas, wala nang may ibang kayang gumawa na gantong kalinis na pagpasla sa kanilang mga miyembro. Patunay lamang na handang gawin ng Israel ang lahat ng paraan upang pahinain ng Hamas at tuluyang maparalisa ang kakayaan nitong umatake muli. Pero sa likod ng pinoproject ng Hamas na fighter at savior sila ng mga Palestinians, ay isang madilim at malagim na kwento. Isang kwento ng korupsyon at terorismo hindi lang sa kanilang mga kalaban, kundi pati na rin sa kapwa nila mamamayan sa loob ng Gaza. Malakas di umano ang ebidensya na kinukuha ng Hamas ang pera galing sa mga international aids na para sana sa rehabilitasyon, healthcare at edukasyon ng mga tao sa Gaza. At ginagamit nila ito sa pagbili ng mga armas at maging panggastos ng kanilang mga leaders na may nagagandahang mga villas sa coastal area ng Gaza. Kung tutuusin, ikaos na sa pang-araw-araw na pangangailangan ng mga tao roon, ngunit nakuha pang mangurakot ng Hamas ayon sa mga Palestinong hindi sang-ayon sa kanilang pamumuno. Bukod pa riyan ay ang favoritism di umano sa pag-distribute ng mga resources na nakakarating lang sa mga taong malakas ang koneksyon sa mga opisyal at pinuno ng Hamas. Ngunit ang pinakamabigat sa lahat ay ang akusasyong handang gumamit ng terorismo ang Hamas, hindi lang sa kanilang kalaban, kundi maging sa mga tao mismo na pinangakuan nilang poprotektahan. Sa loob ng pinaka-densely populated na syudad sa mundo, ginagamit di umano ng Hamas sa mga civilian structures bilang cover sa kanilang military operations laban sa Israel, gaya na lamang ng paglo-launch ng kanilang missile attacks sa loob ng Israel na galing mismo sa mga ospital, eskwelahan at moske na naging target tuloy ngayon ng mga airstrikes ng Israel na ikinasawi ng maraming sibilyan. May mga nagsasabi rin na hindi lahat ng missiles ng Hamas ay pumapasok sa Israel, bagkus ay bumabagsak ang iba nito sa mga kabahayan na puno ng Palestinian civilians at isinasawalang bahala lamang daw ito ng Hamas. Ang taktikang ito ay hindi lamang isang violation sa prinsipyo ng humanitarian law. Malinaw daw itong pagsasawalang bahala sa kaligtasan ng mga inosenteng sibilyan na sigurado madadamay sa resback ng Israel sa ginawa nila pananalakay. Dito ay mas kawawa ang mga tao sa Gaza. Bukod sa mga blockades na iniimpos ng Israel laban sa kanila, isa pa nilang kakaharapin ay ang madungis na taktika ng sinusuportahan nilang grupo na nangakong magbigay sa kanila ng hustisya at kalayaan. Sa ngayon, naghahanda na ang Israel para sa isang full-scale ground offensive at baka sa oras na mapapanood niyo ang video ito ay maaaring mangyayari na ang kinatatakutan ng lahat. Dahil sa hirap ma-identify kung sino ba ang kalaban at sibilyan sa isang full-scale ground combat, tsak, maraming sibilyan na naman ang madadamay. At sa bandang huli, magsisisihan na naman ang dalawang panig kung sino ang dapat malagot sa maraming buhay na masasayang. Ngayong kalahati ng populasyon ng Gaza ay mga bata. Masakit isipin na sa isang sigalot na tumagal ng ilang dekada, magwawakas ang kanilang mga pangarap sa buhay. Ang pag-usbong ng Hamas at lalong paglaki ng gulo sa rehiyong ito ay patunay lamang na malalim ang pinagugatan ng di pagkakaunawaan sa pagitan ng dalawang panig. Walang gustong bumigay, parehas silang may pinaglalaban. Kapwa sila may dahilan na mahirap nating maintindihan bilang mga tao sa labas na hindi nararanasan ang kanilang pang-araw-araw na pakikibaka. Kaya sa giyerang ito, hindi ako magtatanong kung kaninong side ka ba kakampi. Mas gugustuhin ko bang makiusap na lang na ipagdasal natin na bahalang araw may makikitang solusyon ng dalawang panig maging ang international community upang matapos na ang patuloy na pagkawala ng maraming inosenteng buhay. Dahil para sa akin, tanging milagro na lang mula sa langit ang nakikita kong solusyon sa malalim na sigalot na ito. Kung nag-enjoy ka sa video na ito, i-share mo naman sa iba at mag-subscribe ka na rin. Huwag kalimutan panoorin yung mga videos na nasa kanan para lalo kang maubos ang oras mo.
Hello, dinig ba, Linda? Nag-live lang muna ako para may laman naman yung channel. Nag-live lang muna ako para may laman naman yung channel. Musta daw ang Pinas? Start na nga ang kampanya. Ano, tumakbo ka ba ng kagawad, Linda?
Second batch ng Pinoy repatriates mula sa Israel darating na sa Pilipinas bukas. Libo-libong pilots sa
Unsay uhong?
pinaliligas na dahil sa
Dungrabs, unsay uhong?
at Hezbollah.
Kuhol?
Tatandaan po ng lahat ng kandidato na patunayan natin dito, kaya natin patunayan natin na sa issue ng buong bayan. Illegal campaign na
Kandidato ka Mao po ng pangutana, kandidato ka, Linda, na ano, kagawad, ayaw ko tumakbo, kapagod, gusto ko maglakad lang.
Sa barangay at sangguniang labanang elections.
Particularly dun sa sa technical division, packet ng legal division, hanggang dun na sa office of the chairman.
Sukol na, kuhol. Pastilan,
Pinangatawanan sa isinumiteng sinumpaan sa Laysay.
Mushroom. Pastilan, mushroom, hindi.
Watching Vantage with me, Patricia. Day 12, a hospital in Gaza has been attacked. 500 people have died. Hamas says Israel did it. Israel says Palestinian Jihad did it. And they have proof. Joe Biden says his Defense Department has data to show that Israel did not do it. The Arab world says it was Israel. The people are protesting. Honestly, without an
Kabuti raman di ay giahak.
but we can tell you about the repercussions. The attack has whipped up the passions. The room for diplomacy has shrunk. Arab leaders have refused to meet Biden.
Wala na ba'y kuan? Wala na ba kuy unsa ni kaning
Influence can he really contain this conflict? Meanwhile, Netanyahu's talk is falling. He may defeat Hamas, but lose at home. His own people now want him out. He'll also tell you about the new weapon that Israel is deploying. Iron beam, the stuff of sci-fi movies. It's a laser weapon. Also explaining the role and history of Qatar, how it backs terrorist groups and then plays mediator with the West.
Nabe ako'y kuantin, tanawa ang taas ng ano
And the BRI
Pila ni?
in China will tell
Taas
you
kay
about the headlines.
sa akong laptop tin, taas kayo og unsa ni kaning ads. Nagani. Di sabi kasi ni tin floor wala daw ads. Gion na ko last time.
Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov is in North Korea. The visit is expected to lay the groundwork for a future trip by President Putin to Pyongyang. Last month, Kim Jong-un traveled to Russia and invited Putin to visit his country. And Barcelona President Joan Laporta charged in the referee scandal. It's part of
Wala na kay ads tin.
The club itself and two of its former presidents have also been charged. Barcelona, the 27-time Spanish champions, deny any wrong.
It was done by the other team, not you.
Sandstorm daw doon. Saka kinatemplo.
It's day 12 of the Israel-Hamas war, and the news keeps getting worse. Last night, a hospital was bombed in Gaza. Let me repeat that. A hospital was bombed. A building with innocent patients and doctors. More than 500 of them were killed. And the pictures are terrifying. You can see dead bodies strewn around, children and patients being pulled out from the rubble, and blood splattered over the debris. It's a crime that cannot be forgiven. The question is, who did it? The answer depends on who you ask. Hamas and the Arab world are blaming Israel, but Israel says it was a Palestinian rocket strike gone wrong. Listen to this.
On the morning of the second day, the head of hospital, Dr. Mayer Hayat, received a phone call from the Israeli army to tell him that we warned you yesterday by firing 2 strikes. He told the head of the hospital, we warned you yesterday with 2 strikes. Why did you evacuate the hospital until now?
I can confirm that an analysis of the IDF operational systems indicates that a barrage of rockets was fired by terrorists in Gaza, passing in close proximity to the Ali al-Mahdi hospital in Gaza at the time it was hit.
The classic blame game. But let's look at the facts of it. The hospital was located in the heart of Gaza City. It's the oldest one in Gaza. It used to treat around 45,000 patients every year. Was it a military target? Absolutely not. But in the past, Israel has struck medical centers. We have numbers from the World Health Organization. They claim Israel has carried out 51 attacks on Gaza healthcare centers, 51 attacks in 12 days. Around 15 medics have been killed. So it's not unprecedented. Plus, the scale of the attack raises questions. Israel is blaming it on the Islamic Jihad. It's a terror group based in Gaza. But does this group have the firepower to carry out such an attack, to cause such damage, to flatten an entire hospital? According to some experts, it doesn't. But we know that Israel does. Now let's look at the other side. The Israeli Defense Force has released a comprehensive clarification. They have 3 claims. 1. Israel was not carrying out attacks in that area where the hospital was bombed. 2. They detected Islamic Jihad rockets at the same time as the hospital bombing. And 3. Some communications. Communications that allegedly show Islamic Jihad talking about a misfire. That is Israel's defense. But have they provided any evidence for it? They have posted the video of a rocket strike. It's supposed to show a misfire. They've also released an audio conversation of Islamic Jihad terrorists. They're heard talking about a strike gone wrong. Now, I must tell you this. These have not been independently verified. Military experts have questioned their authenticity, but the Americans seem satisfied. Joe Biden blamed Palestinian groups for the attack. He said that Israel's claim was backed up by Pentagon data. But remember, the US is Israel's ally. So we'll have to wait for an independent investigation because of conflict, you can never be sure. Israel has a history of attacking hospitals, and the other side has a history of rocket misfires. So it's too early to draw conclusions. Some leaders realize this. Others have been quick to place blame. Listen to all the responses.
I was deeply saddened and outraged by the explosion at the hospital in Gaza yesterday. And based on what I've seen, it appears as though it was done by the other team, not you.
What happened tonight is a huge tragedy and an ugly massacre that cannot be tolerated or allowed to pass without accountability. Tonight, Israel struck Al Ahli Hospital in Gaza City.
I call on all the people of the Arab and Islamic nations to go out now condemning this massacre, this brutality, these crimes. Go out in all the capitals, in all cities. Raise your voices for this enemy to stop.
There is no excuse for hitting a hospital full of civilians. All facts need to be established, and those responsible must be held accountable.
Hundreds of dead and hundreds of wounded. This is, of course, a catastrophe. In one place, especially in a humanitarian place. And I really hope that this will be a signal that it is necessary to end this conflict as quickly as possible.
The Indian Prime Minister has also reacted. He expressed shock at the hospital attack. He also said civilian casualties are a serious and continuing concern, and that those involved should be held responsible. Now, this statement is very important. It shows that India's support also has red lines, namely civilian casualties. And it's not just India. Every country is worried about this trend. Israel has continued its air operations in Gaza. The death toll there has crossed 3,000. The complete siege also continues, meaning no water, no power, no food. This week, the US claimed that an agreement was reached on aid deliveries. Dozens of trucks were seen heading to Rafah. That's the crossing between Egypt and Gaza. But 24 hours later, they are still there. Those trucks are still there, stuck and waiting for permission. Over in northern Gaza, time is running out. Israel had asked residents to evacuate, but most of them simply can't. Northern Gaza had a population of 1.1 million people. Out of this, 400,000 have fled, 4 lakh people they fled, which means 700,000 people are still trapped in northern Gaza. They're sitting ducks if Israel invades. Yesterday's attack was an example of that, of the risk of staying in northern Gaza. Just one problem though, there is nowhere to go. Down south, resources are running out, hospitals and shelters are packed beyond capacity, and Egypt says they won't take any refugees.
Shukri, the idea of displacement of Palestinians from the Gaza Strip to Egypt simply means that a similar situation will occur by the displacement of Palestinians from the West Bank to Jordan. This means that the idea of a Palestinian state that we're discussing and that the international community is discussing will no longer be possible.
I know all this must sound a bit repetitive. The airstrikes, the looming invasion, especially the looming invasion, we've been talking about it since day one. But put yourself in the shoes of these people. Imagine their fear. Imagine how nerve-wracking it must be. Just sitting there waiting for a deadly invasion. They did not ask for any of this. It was Hamas that decided to poke Israel, to attack Israel. They knew the consequences, but they did it anyway. And now we're on the brink of an invasion. It may or may not happen. It may not happen today or tomorrow, in fact. After all, the US president is still in Israel. Invading Gaza while he's visiting may not sit well with Washington. But it could still happen. It could happen later. And that's when this war could reach the next stage of spillovers and escalations. So the world can't decide on whom to blame. But in West Asia, there is no such confusion. They've all taken one stance, and they're all blaming Israel for the hospital strike. Jordan has condemned the strikes. He blamed Israel. King Abdullah of Jordan has called it a war crime. Jordan has also cancelled its summit with the United States. Same with Egypt. They've condemned Israel. President Sisi called it a quote-unquote deliberate bombing and a violation of international law. Then there's the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain and Morocco, countries that normalized ties with Israel in 2020. They too have blamed Israel for the hospital attack and they dismissed all claims about a rocket misfire. Then there's Saudi Arabia, a country that was supposed to sign a peace deal with Israel. Riyadh has called it a heinous crime, a crime committed by Israeli forces. So you see the pattern here. These are all countries that have normalized ties with Israel. Egypt did it first in 1980. Jordan did it in 1994. Then there were the Abraham Accords in 2020. 3 nations recognized Israel. They called it an era of peace in West Asia. Plus, this was supposed to be the year of Saudi-Israel normalization. Needless to say, it's on pause now. The Arab world may have its issues, but when it comes to the Palestinian cause, their unity still seems to be solid. And a lot of this has to do with the public sentiment there. The leaders of these countries may have gotten close to Israel, but their citizens are still fiercely pro-Palestine. And it shows in the protests across the Arab world. In Amman, Jordanians tried to storm the US embassy. They clashed with the police, tear gas was fired at the protesters.
I'm here to support Hamas and Gaza. To
be honest, Hamas and Gaza are defending the whole nation, either Islamic nation or Arabic nation. And without exaggeration, it is defending the human nation.
In Lebanon, the scenes were similar. Thousands drove to the US Embassy. They protested outside the gates. They clashed with the police.
We're here to let the Arab people wake up, free Palestine. Okay, so it's time to wake up, please.
The US has now issued a do not travel advisory for Lebanon. It shows how serious the situation is, and this is the sentiment across West Asia right now. People are gathering everywhere. They're calling for a free Palestine. There are rallies in Yemen, demonstrations in Turkey, protests in Tunisia, and in Tehran, people chanted, "Death to Israel."
The Palestinian people did not commit a crime. They don't want anything. That is their home. They don't want to leave.
So the Arab world is angry. Its anger is spreading like wildfire, and there are reasons for this. For the Arab world, this did not start on October 7th. It started in 1948 with the Nakba. That's what they call the mass displacement of Palestinians, Nakba. The Palestinian cause is like an open wound on the Arab conscience. If you go back just decades, Palestine was at the center of Arab nationalism. Leaders used it to galvanize the Arab world. They even exploited it for their own gains. Things may have changed in the 21st century. Arab leaders may have gotten closer to Israel. They may have signed the so-called peace deals. But this has not changed the public sentiment. In fact, support for the Abraham Accords has been dismal. Only 27% Emiratis back it. In Bahrain, only 20% of the population are in favor. Now, given these numbers, their leaders had no choice but to back Palestine and hold Israel responsible for the casualties. The war has only revived the Palestinian cause for the Arab world. It is to this war zone that Joe Biden flew in. I can't imagine a worse background. Even before he boarded the flight, there was a setback. His trip to Jordan was cancelled. Biden's initial plan was to meet Arab leaders in Amman, but all of them pulled out. The Palestinian president, the Egyptian president, and the Jordanian king. They all pulled out. They were enraged by the hospital attack in Gaza, so they said no meeting. Nonetheless, Biden pushed on. He was welcomed in Tel Aviv by Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. They shared a hug on the tarmac, and after that, it was time for business. Biden did talk about yesterday's hospital attack. He sided with Israel, though. He said the other team appeared to be behind it, meaning the Palestinians. Biden and Netanyahu held 2 rounds of talks. The first was bilateral, the second was with Israel's war cabinet. Afterwards, both leaders addressed the media. Netanyahu promised to protect civilians while ensuring Israel's victory. Biden said America would always have Israel's back. Listen to this.
Israel will do everything it can to keep civilians out of harm's way. We have asked them and will continue to ask them to move to safer areas. We'll continue to work with you, Mr. President. Mr. President, the road to victory will be long and hard, but united in purpose and with a deep sense of justice and the unbreakable spirit of our soldiers and our people, Israel will prevail.
And I want you to know you're not alone. You are not alone. As I emphasized earlier, we will continue to have Israel's back as you work to defend your people. We'll continue to work with you and partners across the region to prevent more tragedy to innocent civilians.
Both leaders said what the other wanted to hear. But for Biden, it was quite a turnaround because after the hospital attack, the US was angry. They said Biden could ask tough questions to Netanyahu. Maybe he did in private, but in public he was also good. The most Biden did was give a gentle reminder. He drew parallels between the Hamas attack and 9/11. He then asked Israel to not repeat Washington's mistakes. Listen in.
Justice must be done. But I caution us while you feel outraged, don't be consumed by it. After 9/11, we were enraged in the United States. While we sought justice and got justice, we also made mistakes. There's always cost. It requires being deliberate. It requires asking very hard questions. It requires clarity about the objectives and an honest assessment about whether the path you're on will achieve those objectives.
So, what exactly is Joe Biden's game plan? What can he realistically hope for? So far, there's been one development. Biden asked Israel to allow aid into Gaza, and Israel has now agreed. Hopefully, the aid trucks can now start moving. But beyond that, what can Biden do? At this point, not much. We talk about Biden's best and worst case scenario. Best case, he can talk Netanyahu out of the invasion. No Gaza operation, no spillover. But right now, that looks tough. You just heard what Prime Minister Netanyahu told Biden. He said the road to victory will be long and tough. Doesn't sound like de-escalation at all. Now, the worst case scenario. Netanyahu ignores Biden's appeals. He decides to go in, all guns blazing into Gaza. Hundreds of civilians die. Arab countries gang up on Israel, and Iran unleashes its proxies. Basically, a full-blown West Asian war. To be honest, even this scenario looks unlikely. So Biden's realistic bet is somewhere in between. An Israeli invasion with limited casualties. And that's where his Jordan trip was so important. Arab states could have helped in three ways. One, evacuating Gazans. Two, delivering aid. And three, possibly hosting refugees. But now all of that has gone out of the window. The Arab states do not want to discuss aid or evacuations. They want to discuss a ceasefire. Listen to Jordan's foreign minister. There is no use in talking now about anything except stopping the war. That's what he said. And this puts Biden in a bind. On the one hand, he has promised Israel unwavering support. So now he can't back out. On the other, Arab states have toughened their stance. They're saying ceasefire or nothing. The US Secretary of State has been hopping from one capital to the next. He's been meeting leaders across the Arab world, yet he could not get the job done, which is why Biden decided to visit himself. He is hoping that the symbolism of a wartime presidential visit will help. It still could. But this is not West Asia of 5 years ago. The equations have changed. For example, Iran and Saudi Arabia are on talking terms. Iran's foreign minister is in Jeddah today. He's holding talks on the situation in Gaza, and that's another headache for Joe Biden because Saudi Arabia is a key ally and Iran is a sworn enemy. Now, those two coordinating could make matters worse. When you put all of this together, what do you see? An uphill battle for Joe Biden. There was a time when the US was seen as the ultimate power in West Asia, both in war and peace. But not anymore. Today, even Palestinians are rejecting the US. They say Biden is not welcome in the West Bank.
First of all, Biden is unwelcome here because he has a major role in this game, a major role in the aggression on our people, and he is providing the money and weapons to kill our people in Gaza and everywhere.
The US has given over $500 million to Palestine since 2021, yet the people say Biden is not welcome. It sums up America's waning influence. It doesn't have the political clout to rally its Arab allies or to stop Israel's invasion. So maybe Biden's best bet is his military. He's deployed 2 aircraft carriers to the region. He's also put 2,000 soldiers on standby. All of this is aimed at Iran and its proxies. The US has also threatened more sanctions if Tehran intervenes. Those are hard power threats, sanctions and military deterrence. Biden repeated those threats in Tel Aviv today.
We moved U.S. military assets to the region, including positioning the USS Ford carrier strike group in the Eastern Mediterranean, with the USS Eisenhower on the way to deter further aggression against Israel and to prevent this conflict from spreading. The world will know that Israel is stronger than ever. My message to any state or any other hostile actor thinking about attacking Israel remains the same as it was a week ago. Don't.
And Biden made some threats. We don't know if it will work, but we can say this. The US spent most of the last decade withdrawing from West Asia, pulling out soldiers and assets. But one flare up, and they're back to square one. Now let's talk about another arrival, one that started to change warfare as we know it. But first a question. What is the biggest problem with Israel's Iron Dome system? I would argue it's the cost. Each Israeli interceptor missile costs about $50,000. But what if Israel had a cost-effective way to stop the rockets, a way to hit one rocket after another endlessly without having to worry about its expensive interceptors running out? Sounds ideal, right? Well, it may become reality soon because Israel is reportedly rolling out a new defense system. It's the stuff of sci-fi movies. Israel calls it its defensive trump card. It's the Iron Beam anti-missile laser system. Our next report tells you what's the Iron Beam and how it can be a game changer.
Look at this video from last year. That's US President Joe Biden getting ready for a photo shoot. It's at the Ben Gurion Airport in Tel Aviv. What's on the fuss for? Look at what's above his head. The giant camera lens-like thing. That's the reason for all this excitement. Because it's Israel's ace in the hole, the Iron Beam laser anti-missile system. The Iron Beam is a technological marvel, the fruit of years of research in high-intensity lasers. It was first unveiled at the Singapore Air Show in 2014, and after 7 years, it seems to be ready for battlefield action. The system was made for one thing: taking down aerial threats before they hit Israel. First, let's look at its stats. The Iron Beam reportedly has a range of between 7 to 10 kilometers. Israel has said it can focus the beam to the diameter of a coin within that distance. The Iron Beam fires lasers that can reach energy levels of about 100 kilowatts. For context, that's about 24 grams of TNT exploding every second. Or almost 1.5 kgs of dynamite every minute. That's the amount of energy coming out of the Iron Beam. All this would be directed at incoming missiles, drones, rockets, and any other aerial threat. Here's a video released by Israel's defense forces last year, showing a successful test of the Iron Beam. How it works is simple. The laser will be fired at key spots on the incoming projectiles. In missiles, this means the fins, rudder, or the warhead. Damaging the fins and rudder will destabilize the missile's flight path, make it change course. Firing at the warhead could overheat and cripple the detonator, rendering the missile useless. It's similar when engaging with drones. Either ruin the wings or propellers, or fry the camera, leaving the drone operator blind. But this method has a drawback when it comes to kamikaze drones and rockets especially. These are simple weapons used for destruction. Wherever they land, they will explode. So changing their path may protect critical targets, but some damage will still be done. Which is why Israel isn't going to replace all its systems with the Iron Beam. The laser is meant to augment, not replace Israel's existing missile defense systems. It'll try and mop up the projectiles that slip through the Iron Dome. Like a short-range laser defense support system. That could be the initial plan anyway, but the Iron Beam and other lasers will get stronger over time. They could eventually replace other costlier systems. While building the Iron Beam certainly isn't cheap, using it is relatively cost-effective. Israel says it will cost about $2,000 to destroy an incoming threat using the Iron Beam. Compare that to $50,000 per Iron Dome interceptor missile. You can see why Israel will want to improve the laser tech as time goes by. But even today, the Iron Beam's deployment will mark a milestone, signaling the beginning of the age of laser warfare.
So Israel may have a new weapon, the Iron Beam. So does the Hamas. And for them, it's Telegram. We're talking about the social media app, Telegram, where Hamas is telling its side of the story. That's some context here. The Hamas is a designated terrorist organization in the US and Europe, which means social media platforms cannot host Hamas content. most of them don't. Meta and Google have banned Hamas accounts, but not Telegram. It allows Hamas to use its services. So the military wing of Hamas has a Telegram channel. It's called the Al Qasim Brigades. On October 7th, that's the day of the attack, this channel had about 200,000 followers. Since then, it has tripled. Now they have some 600,000 followers, 6 lakh followers on the Telegram channel. The views on the posts have also skyrocketed. Before the attack, a post on this Hamas channel was viewed around 25,000 times. Now they're viewed more than 300,000 times. That's more than a tenfold increase. It tells you how popular their posts have become. And that's because of Telegram's moderation rules. Around 800 million people use Telegram globally, almost twice as many as Twitter or X. But unlike other social media platforms, Telegram has very lax rules, and that makes it a hotbed for extremist organizations. So what does Telegram have to say about this? Well, its founder does not believe all posts are harmful. Let me read out his statement for you. This is what he says. Earlier this week, Hamas used Telegram to warn civilians in Ashkelon to leave the area ahead of their missile strikes. Would shutting down their channel help save lives, or would it endanger more lives? While it would be easy for us to destroy the source of information, doing so risks exacerbating an already dire situation. So that's what Pavel Durov said. He's the founder of Telegram. He's from Russia, now based in Dubai. He believes Telegram is doing more good than harm. But is it really? Hamas is a terrorist organization. They attack Israel, they kill civilians, they took nearly 200 people hostage. How will their side of the story help the world? And then we have Hamas-affiliated groups. They're not run by Hamas, but they support its terrorist activities. What happens to those groups? Telegram says it is moderating the content, and its moderators have removed millions of posts. But this story is not really limited to Telegram. Social media in general has seen an uptick in pro-Hamas content. Meta says it has removed over 795,000 posts, 795,000 posts. Then there's X, formerly known as Twitter. It has removed hundreds of Hamas-affiliated accounts. What do these reports tell you? Hamas is acing the social media game. And it's only one part of the problem. The second part is misinformation and fake news. There's been a deluge since the war began. There's fake news, fake videos, fake testimonies, and fake warnings. And all of this could be dangerous in a war. Last week we showed you some videos, but there are thousands, and they're being shared thousands of times. So you can imagine the scale of misinformation, and it's getting worse as the war escalates. Who takes accountability for all of this? Certainly not the social media platforms. They say they're trying to tackle misinformation. Well, they're failing. More and more people now depend on social media for news, for reliable information. What they get is a flood of misinformation that clouds facts and judgment. Like they say, truth is the first casualty of war, and on social media, it is dying 1,000 deaths. Let's talk about another potential casualty. The political career of Prime Minister Netanyahu. His prospects look dire, and history does not help. Let's take you back to October 1973. Egypt and Syria launched a surprise attack on Israel. In 1973, it led to what's called the Yom Kippur War. Israel won that war, but at great cost to its then Prime Minister Golda Meir. Her government had failed to anticipate the attack, leading to growing anger and eventually her ouster. Now, Benjamin Netanyahu faces anger. He is Israel's current and longest-serving Prime Minister. He has built the image of Mr. Security, and he keeps Israel safe and helps it grow. That's his pitch. But now this attack happened on his watch, and polls say he's in trouble. Only 21% of Israelis want Netanyahu to stay in power. Our next report tells you more.
One Israeli camp minister barred from a hospital entrance. Another called a traitor and imbecile when she came to comfort evacuated families. A third minister accused of betraying people by a grieving man at a hospital. As Israel copes with its shock and grief, little love is being displayed towards its government. It's been accused of dropping the country's guard and leaving it vulnerable. And now anger is mounting against the government. So far, Israel's top general, the defense minister, national security advisor, foreign minister, finance minister, and intelligence chiefs have acknowledged the failure. These are all statements of personal accountability. Officials agree that they failed to anticipate and prevent what has become the worst attack on civilians in Israel's history. But what about Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu? Well, he's made no such statement so far, and it seems unlikely that he will. Military commando turned Prime Minister. Netanyahu is Israel's longest-serving PM, and also among its most controversial. The country has been battling polarization over Bibi's judicial overhaul drive. It triggered walkouts by some military reservists. It fueled protests across the nation.
We are standing here for the last 38 weeks, calling Prime Minister Netanyahu to stop what he's doing.
I'm here because we don't want Bibi and his fellow crooks destroying democracy in Israel.
Netanyahu's ratings dropped to 27% in opinion polls, but Bibi remained defiant. While he was following the popularity charts, he prided himself on promoting economic growth. He's been credited with presiding over a sustained period of economic growth where the high-tech industry grew tremendously. But when the October 7th attack struck Israel, both security and economy took a hit, and the fallout will affect Israel for years to come. And now it seems like a day of judgment looms for Bibi. Polls show that he's in trouble. Only 21% of Israelis want Netanyahu to remain prime minister. If elections were to be held today, his party would lose a third of its seats. But the thing is, Israelis don't want a ballot. The left offers no answers. The center is too pragmatic. For them, the right remains the right answer. So Israelis want action from their prime minister. So far, he's been busy with the top brass from the world over. He's won vocal Western support. He has visited the conflict zone once. He has limited encounters with media and public. He took a week before meeting relatives of those held hostage by Hamas. It took him 5 days to form an emergency government. But none of it has done much to ease public fury. Is this the end of the road for Bibi? Well, that's difficult to say, because Netanyahu has had a record-long career of political comebacks. Under him, Israel has come to see itself as a military, political, and technological power. But today, Israel is facing its biggest test in decades, and so is Bibi. How this war pans out will determine not just Israel's fate, but also that of the man who's leading the charge.
For our next story, let me pull up two sets of pictures for you, both are from the same location, Doha. Two sets of photos. One shows Antony Blinken meeting the Prime Minister of Qatar. The second shows the chief of Hamas meeting Iran's foreign minister. Same city, sworn enemies, just hours apart. It sums up the role of Qatar. They instigate and then try to resolve. We have mentioned some of this before. Qatar hosts the top leadership of Hamas, including their current chief. They also hosted the Taliban and the Muslim Brotherhood. They've been accused of funding Al-Qaeda, yet Qatar is a Western darling. Last year, the US declared them a major non-NATO ally. Even Israel gives them a long road. They permit Qatar to send aid to Gaza, the same aid that is often swindled by Hamas terrorists. So what's the play here? Why is Qatar handled with kid gloves? The answer lies in history. In the 1990s, the US and Saudi Arabia had shaky relations. The kingdom did not want American soldiers. The kingdom of Saudi Arabia, they did not want American soldiers. So where did they go? Qatar. The regime in Doha gave US soldiers a new home. They set up shop at the Al Udeid military base. Even today, it's the forward headquarters of the US Central Command. So the equation is quite simple. America keeps Qatar's ruling family in power. In return, they help America keep their army. 2 decades on, that has not changed. But Qatar has another side as well. An ambitious and power-hungry side. We're talking about a very small country, remember. Its total area is around 11,000 square kilometers, about the size of India's Tripura state. And population, just about 2.7 million people. Their GDP is just one-fourth of Saudi Arabia, so Qatar looked elsewhere for power. One strategy was Al Jazeera, a television channel based in Doha. On paper, it has editorial freedom from the Qatari regime. But accusations do emerge. Al Jazeera is said to be soft on Islamist elements in West Asia, Hamas included. The other strategy was to host and leverage Islamists. In 2013, the Muslim Brotherhood was expelled from Egypt. And who welcomed them? Qatar. Same with the Taliban. Doha says it is keeping an eye on these radicals, making sure that they're not up to some trouble. Well, if that's the case, how did Hamas plot such a massive attack? How did the Taliban take over Afghanistan? So Qatar's intentions are suspect. They've used terrorists to keep bigger Arabs in check, bigger Arab states in check. It's a policy that left Qatar isolated. Remember, in 2017, the Arab states cut off diplomatic ties with Doha. They imposed a financial blockade as well. And the reason was this: Qatar's support for terrorism. The blockade lasted for 4 years. It was finally lifted in 2021. So I guess in the long term, the strategy worked. One reason for that is American support. Think of Qatar as Washington's shady friend. They talk to people the Americans cannot, like the Taliban and the Hamas. In 2021, they brokered the deal between the US and the Taliban. This month, they negotiated a deal between Ukraine and Russia. Moscow agreed to release 4 Ukrainian children. And now they're mediating between Israel and Hamas, trying to get the hostages released. So Qatar has become the go-to mediator. Just one problem though. They actively support these same groups. Consider the Hamas. Qatar gives them millions of dollars every year. Most of it is disguised as aid money. They also allow Hamas leaders to stay in Doha. Fun fact, their hotels are just minutes away from the Al Udeid base, from the US Central Command. It tells you how solid their position is. When Hamas attacked Israel, they did not condemn the attack. Qatar did not condemn the attack. In fact, they blamed Israel. Doha said Israel is quote-unquote solely responsible for this escalation. Yet that same Doha is now mediating for Israel.
The state of Qatar's diplomatic priorities and movements are to seek an immediate ceasefire, protect civilians, release prisoners, and work to limit the expansion of violence and conflict in the region, which will have serious consequences if it expands.
It's a neat strategy, also a dangerous and cruel one. Qatar effectively uses terror sponsorship as state policy. It gives them a seat at the high table of diplomacy. It has also made them a darling of the West. But we've seen how terror groups work. It's never long before they strike the hand feeding them. Now let's look at what's happening on the other side of Asia. China is hosting the third Belt and Road Forum. On the face of it, it's a forum to discuss the Belt and Road Initiative, Beijing's death-laden plan to restart the old Silk Route. It's supposed to be the main talking point at this forum, but it never really is. The forum has become a place for China to flex its diplomatic muscle. Another place for Beijing to talk about changing the world order to suit its interests. So as expected, politics more than economics is making headlines. We'll talk about both these things, starting with the big political news, one that has captured everyone's attention at this forum, the presence of Russian President Vladimir Putin. Putin has been wary of leaving Russia lately. The International Criminal Court issued an arrest warrant against him in March, this year, in March. And since then, Putin has either skipped events or attended them virtually. He's not left Russia. But that changed this month. A few days ago, he traveled to Kyrgyzstan. It's a former Soviet nation, part of Russia's historical backyard. So it wasn't really a big deal. But the trip to China is being seen differently, as though Putin is making a statement. And the Russian president's speeches confirm that suspicion.
The Regarding how external factors and conflicts influence the development of Russo-Chinese relations, all these external factors are common threats and they strengthen Russian-Chinese interactions. As for the prospects of further Russia-China cooperation, I am optimistic about it.
So the message is simple. The Western world continues to isolate Russia over the war in Ukraine, but it doesn't matter to Moscow. Putin has a steadfast ally in Xi Jinping, and their two nations will keep supporting each other irrespective of what the West says or does. Putin had a bilateral meet with Xi Jinping on the sidelines of the forum. His opening statement signaled his intent to bring the two countries closer.
In the current difficult conditions, close foreign policy coordination is especially necessary.
Xi was clearly on board. He heaped praise upon Putin and upon the growing Russia-China relationship.
In the 10 years from 2013 to the present, President Putin and I have met 42 times, building a good working relationship and a strong friendship. Both countries have deepened our mutual political trust and maintained strategic coordination in a close and effective manner.
Seems like a touching speech between two close friends. These sentiments are rare, if not non-existent in politics. There's almost always a catch, and with China, that catch is usually financial.
Our bilateral trade volume has reached a new record high, and we're consistently moving towards our joint goal of $200 billion US.
Speaking of financials, let's look at the rest of the Belt and Road Forum. Xi Jinping insists it will bring prosperity, it will help all member countries. But so far, it has brought prosperity only to the loan sharks in Beijing. Look at Sri Lanka. The island nation had a financial crisis last year, defaulted on its international loans, among them were loans from China, loans taken for BRI projects like the Humber-Tota port. Then there's Pakistan, always on the edge of financial ruin. A big reason for this is the CPEC, the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, which is part of the BRI. And it's not just South Asia. Zambia in Africa has seen a default. Ethiopia had to seek a debt suspension. Montenegro in Europe is suffering too, and the Portuguese so is Italy, which is why Rome is expected to pull out of the BRI next year. Despite all this, Xi Jinping seems to be doubling down.
The China Development Bank and the Export-Import Bank of China will each set up a 350 billion yuan financing window. An additional 80 billion yuan will be injected into the Silk Road Fund. Together, they will support BRI projects on the basis of market and business operations.
He's promised about $60 billion more in financing, which means more debt and eventually more defaults. It seems Xi Jinping will not stop until the whole world dances to the tunes of Beijing's bankers. Keeping up with the Kardashians, Taylor Swift at a Travis Kelce game, and X, formerly known as Twitter. You know what's common between the three? The chaos and drama seem endless. Our last story tonight is about the last with X. Elon Musk took over X last year, and since then, the platform has been on quite the roller coaster. And it's not ending anytime soon. Here's the latest swerve. X has started charging new users. For now, in New Zealand and the Philippines, they will now have to pay $1 a year. This will be to access key features like the ability to tweet, retweet, like, and reply to posts. You have to pay for all of this. What is the purpose of the plan? Is it simply for financial gains? And how are people reacting to this? Our next report tells
you. Nothing in life is free, not even free speech. At least not on X, formerly known as Twitter. Last month, billionaire tech mogul Elon Musk suggested that all X users may have to pay for access. And now he's following through. X has started charging new users in New Zealand and the Philippines. They will pay $1 a year to access key features of the platform, including the ability to tweet, retweet, like, and reply to posts. Those who don't pay the fee will only be able to read posts, watch videos, and follow accounts. There is a clear financial interest for the company here, but they say the reason goes beyond it. Musk says he wants people to pay so that bots can be tackled, saying the aim is to reduce spam and manipulation. A few have said that this is a good idea, but most users call this the final nail in the coffin. Some say this decision may hurt X further. Maybe Twitter's Mercury was in retrograde last year when Musk took over the platform, but it's been on a roller coaster ever since. In case you haven't been able to keep up, here are some of the big changes. Immediately after taking over, Musk fired Twitter's top three executives. The communications department was scrapped. Musk, who was then the CEO, took the decision to step down after a poll. Paid verifications were introduced in the form of Twitter Blue. In July this year, Twitter was rebranded as X, and its well-known bluebird logo changed into this ominously fashioned letter.
Why would you even lose a branding that's as important as Twitter? Like, people regularly use tweet, retweet, like things like quote tweet, stuff like that. Any other brand would kill for that kind of like daily brand recognition, but he's just so driven on his own little like personal, like, oh, I can do this all, and it's my brand X, that he's willing to lose this incredible marketing.
Then X limited the number of posts that users could read in a day. In August, users were unable to block accounts. While X was facing multiple battlefronts, Musk was busy daring Meta CEO Mark Zuckerberg to a cage fight.
These people have so much money and live such different lives from us that I honestly just don't care.
This month, X stopped displaying headlines on posts linking to news articles. Changes galore, but so are the problems, one of them being a surge in hate speech on the platform.
We can't just decide who doesn't get to post or have their opinion because we don't like it.
In fact, it's been investigated by the European Union for the possible spread of violent content and hate speech. It's also been fined by Australia's Internet Safety Watchdog. But the problem that would worry Musk the most is this. X has lost half of its advertising revenue since he took over. So now, Musk wants people to pay up. With this decision, X could risk losing more users and in turn drive down the advertising revenue even further. Musk has tried many things since taking over X, but despite the pandemonium, he doesn't have a lot to show for it. So he's hoping that the latest move pays off, quite literally.
Now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. In Gaza, rescuers comb through wreckage with their bare hands, searching for survivors. In Egypt, aid volunteers spray at the Rafah crossing for victims of the hospital attack. And in Israel, sirens went off in the country as the Iron Dome was caught in action intercepting Hamas rockets. Also, we're taking you back in history on this day, 1977. 3 Palestinian hijackers were killed when German commandos stormed a Lufthansa aircraft. All 86 passengers who had been held hostage for 5 days were free. We're leaving you on that note. Thanks for watching. We'll see you tomorrow. Kiev marched with Palestinian flags and chanted slogans denouncing Israel. Many gathered outside the Israeli embassy in the capital. In the early morning hours today, thousands of Turks gathered in front of the Israeli consulate in Istanbul. They clashed with the police in angry demonstrations. Turkish security forces had to use pepper spray, smoke grenades, and water cannons to disperse the crowd. In fact, the Turkish President Erdogan said that the hospital blast showed that Israeli attacks lack the most basic human value, seeing the situation. Israel's National Security Council has now issued a warning against travel to Turkey. It has also urged Israeli citizens that they should leave as soon as possible. Israeli airlines are now arranging flights from Istanbul for Israelis who want to leave. There were demonstrations in Yemen as well. Hundreds of protesters took to the streets of the capital, Sanaa. In Lebanon, more than 100 protesters gathered near the US embassy carrying Palestinian flags. The Lebanese police sprayed water and tear gas on them.
We're here to let the Arab people wake up. Free Palestine. Okay, so it's time to wake up, please.
Meanwhile, the Iranian capital, Tehran, saw massive crowds take to the streets to protest against the hospital attack in Gaza. They marched from the Palestine Square to the French and British embassies, rallying till 3 a.m. Tehran time. Listen out to what some of the protesters had to say.
The Palestinian people did not commit a crime. They don't want anything. That is their home. They don't want to leave. I expect the rulers of my country, Iran, to support Palestine and the Palestinian people.
Speaking of the leaders, Iran's foreign ministry has condemned the hospital bombing of unarmed and defenseless people in Gaza. It has called for an oil embargo and other sanctions on Israel. Iran has also urged the members of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation to expel all Israeli ambassadors. This comes as the OIC members meet in Jeddah to discuss the escalating war. In Jordan, hundreds gathered outside the King Abdullah Mosque in Amman. They condemned Israel and firmly opposed US President Joe Biden's visit. Some even attempted to storm the Israeli embassy. Protesters scuffled with the police as they barricaded the route to the embassy.
During the foundation of Israel, when it occupied this area, they are breaching international humanitarian law. Geneva Agreement is obvious in this regard. Medical centers or hospitals should not be touched. But what is happening are crimes against humanity under the American government's cover.
Jordan has also called out President Biden's planned summit with Arab leaders. Jordan's King Abdullah spoke out, saying the bombing was a massacre and a war crime that one cannot be silent about. Foreign Minister Eman Safadi said, and I quote, "This war and the aggression are pushing the region to the brink." He added that Jordan would only host the summit when all participants agreed on its purpose, which would be to stop the war. Criticism has poured in from several Arabic leaders. Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi issued a statement against Israel. He called the blast a clear violation of international law. Saudi Arabia too strongly condemned the explosion as a heinous crime. Meanwhile, Qatar's foreign ministry issued a statement declaring the expansion of Israeli attacks a dangerous escalation. You see, Arab countries have openly picked a side in this war, and they are now voicing support for the Palestinians. And for more on this, we are now being joined by Ahmed Ali Abraham. He is a political analyst and US-Saudi relations expert. I want to start off by talking about the protests and anger that we are seeing about what's happened in Gaza, a hospital bomb, no accountability just yet. How do you gauge the mood across the Middle East right now?
Yeah, the Middle East is fuming. Listen, there is nothing new regarding the Palestinian file. I mean, whether Hamas attacked Israel on October the 7th, and it's definitely a heinous attack, and it's not acceptable. this is what the Palestinian people go through day in and day out, whether it is in Gaza or in the West Bank. So this has been going more and more. Now, Hamas, which is a brutal militia, they decided to take the fate of many people, Palestinian people in Gaza, and Israel has retaliated not on Hamas. They actually retaliated on the whole Palestinian people, 2 million people. So it's like you are fighting ISIS in Iraq and you decided to carpet bomb the whole nation of Iraq. So it is not fair for the Palestinian people. It is starting fuming in the whole Islamic world and it's all in the whole Arab state. And this could have been combated in another way, actually, that Israel can gain momentum, especially with normalization with the GCC country and other people, but they chose the military and killing innocent people. And this is what's going to create more hostile in the region. We tried in the past 2 years to actually zero the problems in the whole region. Saudi Arabia now is having a relationship with Iran. Everybody is having their good day, and all of a sudden we have this happening, and we have the United States pulling 2 aircraft carrier with 2,000 elite experts of the military with the newest weapon. It doesn't look like that it's gonna stop at Gaza. It seems like a World War III is coming into place. This is just the start of the episode.
World War III is coming. I also want to talk to you about this latest update coming in. You're joining us from Riyadh. Saudi Arabia has also advised all its citizens to leave Lebanon immediately. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, definitely. Saudi Arabia announced like probably a year and a half ago that Lebanon is no fly zone for the security reasons. And now they are really announcing this for the people that if somebody went to Lebanon or there's a Saudi citizen in Lebanon, they need to depart immediately. I'm sure the government is anticipating that there will be some bombing in maybe south of Lebanon or in whole Lebanon. You know, if Hezbollah is shooting at Lebanon, I would take Hezbollah the next day. For me, I consider Hezbollah is a military militia, but that doesn't mean I carpet bomb 10,000 square kilometer of innocent Lebanese. So this announcement actually comes from the Saudis to protect their citizen. It's always been placed for the past year and a half, and they just announced it to reassure that any Saudi with a Saudi passports need to leave the soil of Lebanon.
And how do you view President Biden's statements that were made a little while from now? Aid for both Gaza and West Bank, strong support for Israel. He also says that the hospital blast was not carried out by Israel's military. How do you view all these statements?
God bless President Biden. I don't know where his mind is, but definitely he's taking this as a tool of the internal campaign of 2024. He wants to maximize it. He's trying to get the Jewish lobbyists in America on his side and everybody on his side to protect Israel. This is going to gain him some ground, so he's using it for his campaign. And basically, there is enough evidence that the IDF have beyond reasonable doubt that they targeted this hospital and brutally killed all those innocent people, men and women and children. But as all the indication around the world, it says that Israel has done it. The Minister of Defense actually tweeted before he actually targeted the hospital, and he deleted the tweet. All the evidence are there, but definitely the unconditional support of the United States to Israel is putting the United States in a very bad situation among the Arab nation. The Arab people and the Muslim people are more fuming from the United States policy, and this is just only unfortunately going to give more leverage to the competitors of the United States in the region, like China and Russia, to take place and to start make policies like what China did, brokering a deal between Iran and Saudi Arabia. Definitely the trust on the Palestinian file is definitely not with the United States.
Would you call this a diplomatic failure on the US president's part?
I think it's a very huge diplomatic failure. This file has been with the United States for the longest time. It only increased tension in the region. It created terrorism. It created Hamas. It created Hezbollah. It created militia in Syria. It created terrorist militia in Iraq. This is what you're doing. It's a domino effect. if you are not going to have two-state solution and East Jerusalem is the capital of Palestine, this region is not going to rest. And you cannot actually push the Palestinian people to the sea or Sinai. If anybody wants, why don't any European country, which is they are civilized and they have the greatest human rights in the world, take 2 million Palestinians on their lands? Why they want to why they want to push them to Egypt? Why they want to push them to Jordan? What is the status? So I think quit the hypocrisy and come clean and try to put things on the table. And unfortunately, if this is going to continue, there will be no rest for the Israeli innocent people in Israel and for the Palestinians. And to be honest with you, the Palestinian people are very tough people to kill. No matter how much you kill them, they're going to be standing up. You will see this is not going to end. This is not a solution. Carpet bombing has never been a solution. They've been living like this for the past 70 years.
My final question for you, sir. If you talk about the humanitarian crisis in Gaza, Israel will allow aid into Gaza via Egypt. That's a statement coming in. This is what Israel is saying as of now. Do you think there are any conditions attached to this?
The condition is everything has to go through Egypt, and Egypt is willing, and they've been calling and they've been raising the flag to get all the humanitarian assistance through Rafah. However, there will be no one Palestinian coming out of this gate to Egypt. So the tensions needs to slow down. Everybody needs to hold his mood, and ceasefire has to start. As we're speaking now, the Israelis is bombing multiple cities in Gaza while President Biden is there. So they are in a very bad crisis. They exceeded any tragedy that you can think of. But all the Arab nations are backing Egypt in order to send these kind of aids to the Palestinian people. But you cannot have the Palestinian people actually pushed to say no or to Egypt.
Right, Mr. Al-Ibrahim, thank you so much for your insights and thanks for joining us on Gravitas.
Sure, thank you.
Things have changed drastically on ground in Israel. The war has entered a more deadly phase. Its tentacles are spreading to other countries. 6 airports across France have been evacuated. Reports say the French police received a threatening email. Spain's Valencia airport is on high alert. There are protests across West Asia. Today, the chance for multi-front war is more real than ever. Here's what fueled it. The bombing of a Gaza hospital. Let's take you straight to the focal point of this war. This is what remains of Gaza's Al-Ahli hospital. Take a look. Its entrance is littered. There is dust and only dust. Let me remind you, this was a hospital tending to patients during wartime. You can see stretchers, blankets, chairs scattered around. The hospital was bombed on Tuesday evening.
Around 6:30 p.m., a shell struck the hospital. We don't know what it was, but we saw its devastating impact. The children being torn to pieces.
Such was the intensity of the blast that parts of the hospital building collapsed, trapping people under the rubble. Vehicles and ambulances parked nearby were left charged, and the windows of the neighboring building completely shattered. A doctor working in the hospital shared his terrifying account of the tragedy. Father Naim, the head of the orthopedic surgery department, had just finished a procedure. He says he heard a loud explosion. People came running to his department, screaming for help. Naim says the hospital was flooded with dismembered bodies and wounded people. He saved whomever he could. The health ministry run by Hamas in Gaza said at least 500 people died in this blast. 500. That's the highest death toll from a single incident in this war. British Palestinian doctor Hassan Abu Sita was in the operating room last evening. He says he heard the sound of a missile. Before he knew it, the ceiling of the operation theatre collapsed on him and other physicians. When he went out in the courtyard, he found bodies and limbs scattered everywhere. Abu Sita treated a man whose legs were blown off. Those who survived the blast have only horror stories to share.
We were just sitting here and suddenly there was an explosion. The glass shattered on us. Many people were martyred.
We came here because our neighborhood was being bombed. My son was injured in his hip and has 70 stitches in his forehead. I don't know what to do. It happened around 8 p.m. I don't know. A missile fell on us. We were all on the floor. Everything got destroyed. We were destroyed. But we thank God anyway.
The Al Ali Hospital is more than 140 years old. It was founded in 1882 and run by the Anglican Church. The hospital was located in the Zaytun neighborhood. This is in the northern part of the Gaza Strip. Locals say the hospital welcomed people of all faiths. It even had a church and a mosque inside for patients and families to pray. Fate had a different plan for patients who came into the hospital on Tuesday night.
My home is close to the hospital. I handed the boy to my wife and told her to get him treated. I went to the hospital. I saw young children whose legs were amputated. I felt sorry for them. I told them the ambulance is coming. I was carrying the dead bodies and moving them next to the wall outside. It happened suddenly. People were sitting. They were making coffee and tea. People were talking to each other. It was a safe location, a hospital.
It did not take too long for the news of the blast to spread. Soon protests broke out, first in West Bank, then in neighboring Arab countries. We will take you to the protest sites in a few minutes from now. First, let's show you a photo that the Israeli armed forces have released. This is the before and after footage of the hospital bombing. Israel claims that the Palestinian group PIJ or the Palestine Islamic Jihad is responsible for the bombing. Israel says the hospital blast was the result of a failed rocket launch by the PIJ.
I can confirm that an analysis of the IDF operational systems indicates that a barrage of rockets was fired by terrorists in Gaza, passing in close proximity to the Ali al-Mahdi hospital in Gaza at the time it was hit. Intelligence from few sources that we have in our hands indicates that the Islamic Jihad is responsible for the failed rocket launch which hit the hospital in Gaza.
Hamas is pointing the finger squarely at Israel. Listening.
We hold the American administration and the Western countries that support the Zionist entity are responsible in full for the horrific massacres and the genocide that is committed by the occupation against our people in Gaza, the last of which was the massacre at the civil hospital.
Let me be clear, we are not here to tell you which side you should be believing and which you should not. Our job as journalists is to bring you the facts from the ground, and the truth is that facts are yet to be ascertained. And chances are we may never know what happened. But here's what we can tell you for sure as of now. The Gaza hospital bombing is what has fueled the fire. In the last 24 hours, buildings have been flattened in Gaza. A UN-run school has been bombed. As the war on battleground rages on, a war of words has also broken out. A war of trading blame. Palestine is pointing fingers at Israel. Israel is blaming Palestinian militants, while Arab countries have picked a clear side. It's not clear which side actually bombed the Al Ali hospital. Both Israel and Palestine, however, have presented evidence. Which one is to be believed, we may never know. Let's first look at Israel's explanation. It has shared a video of the explosion. The clip shows a hospital and its surroundings before and after being hit by the rocket. Take a look. trying to make, look at the frame. It compares the bombed hospital with some other sites hit by Israeli rockets. By drawing this comparison, the Israeli military is trying to highlight the difference between the two. On the right side of the image, you can see craters formed by Israel's rockets. The military claims that their weapons, especially their rockets, are high impact and that they usually create craters at the site they hit. But on the left side, which shows the bombed hospital, the military says there are no visible craters or even significant damage to the building. So what's the conclusion? Israel says it wasn't their rocket, but in fact a Palestinian Islamic Jihad rocket, which misfired. For evidence, it has this video and some technical insights. On top of this, the Israeli Defense Forces have released an audio clip. Israel is claiming it is an intercepted phone call between two Hamas operatives. Before I play it out for you, I want to make it clear. WION couldn't independently verify this clip. It was released by the IDF. Listen.
سبحان الله من أين لا تجد تجد نعم لا تجد من فريق من المنطقة الغربية ثلاث حقي كل تغير من المقبرة المرة مستشفى المعمداني بيقول له شفطة من بلاد وفي مقبرة المعمداني ولا عند الساحة بالصبح هي وين بدها تدخل على الساحة؟ تو تدخل على الساحة تدخلش على البلد عندك اليمين في مستشفى المعمداني
As you heard, the men claimed that the shrapnel of the missile looked local and not from Israel. And what does Palestine have to say? The Palestinian Islamic Jihad has denied involvement. In a statement, the group called Israel's allegation a fabrication of lies. It also says the hospital had received public notice of evacuation over threats of bombing. Take a look at this report by the World Health Organization. It was put out 4 days ago. It says Israel repeatedly ordered the evacuation of 22 hospitals which were treating more than 2,000 patients in northern Gaza. Let me be clear again, we are not saying that it was Israel who bombed the hospital, but these are the facts that are available to us as of now.
Kuan pa sila post-post. Lahi man pud good mi Ma'am Shi kay di man mi kuan huna-huna man mi sa inyo ha.
Although Israel didn't start this war, Israel will finish it. Once the Jewish people were stateless, once the Jewish people
Welcome to the US Eagle Eye YouTube channel. In Israel's uphill struggle, things have only gotten angrier over time. The United States, which has been a major supporter of Israel since the beginning of Hamas's terrorist activities, has expanded the scale of its assistance. A US Navy emergency response force is moving into the waters off the Israeli coast. The Pentagon is preparing American troops for a potential deployment to the country. This increases the U.S. show of force in the region as it seeks to avoid conflict with Israel. Two defense officials familiar with the planning disclosed that a rapid response force of 2,000 soldiers and Marines has been dispatched. The U.S. continues to send a message of deterrence to Iran and the Lebanese militant group Hezbollah. The 2,000 Marines will join a growing number of U.S. warships and forces approaching Israel. U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin has ordered nearly 2,000 troops to prepare for a potential deployment to Israel. To help with tasks such as medical and logistical support, several defense officials said. Taken together, these moves are aimed at preventing a wider regional war, the officials said. But there is also a risk of deepening U.S. involvement in a conflict in which the Biden administration has sought to avoid direct military action. Officials emphasize that the U.S. has no plans to deploy American boots on the ground to fight in the war between Israel and Hamas. Israeli officials warn that it could be long and difficult. But the planning and movements offer a window into the kind of assistance the U.S. could provide, including managing logistics away from the front lines and offering medical support. Experts warn that this could be particularly valuable if Israel launches a complex and bloody ground offensive in Gaza. The decision also comes at a time when the U.S. military is steadily strengthening its presence in the Middle East. Officials explained that the Pentagon was being deliberately cautious about how to discuss any potential deployment of U.S. troops to Israel. This is because the Biden administration does not want to give the impression that American troops could be involved in a hot war, officials said. The 26th Marine Expeditionary Unit, which specializes in amphibious operations, crisis response, humanitarian assistance, and some special operations, has been deployed near Kuwait in recent weeks as part of a planned exercise. However, Captain Angelica White, the unit's spokesperson, said it had departed early due to the events that unfolded. Media outlets had previously reported that the unit was preparing for a possible move against Israel. Officials did not specify exactly where the Navy unit was headed, other than to say it was heading towards Israel. One official said it would be heading towards Israel's southern coast, which would place U.S. forces near the country's two coastlines. The unit is currently based aboard the amphibious assault ship USS Bataan in the Gulf of Oman, officials said. The USS Carter Hall, a harbor landing ship operating alongside the USS Bataan, is also en route to Israel. The USS Bataan and the 26th MEU have been operating in the Middle East since August to deter Iranian aggression in critical waterways in the region, including the Gulf of Oman and the Strait of Hormuz. Austin's order to prepare the troops for a possible deployment does not mean that they will definitely be deployed, or that any of them will undertake combat duty if they go to Israel, officials said. But they added that the Secretary's decision shortens the amount of time the designated troops would have to prepare for the mission if they were ordered to go. Sabrina Singh, Deputy Pentagon Press Secretary, had some remarks on the matter. I don't have anything more to offer at this time. I can give you more details later, but at the moment I have nothing more specific to add. The latest development of the war in Israel is unfortunately depressing. In a deserted shopping complex near the coastal city of Ashkelon in southern Israel, a lone figure wanders through an empty parking lot. It's eerie. All the shops are closing their shutters. Escalators and children's toy stores are closed. Swarms of flies feed on overflowing garbage cans. Old food and plastic bags are scattered on the asphalt. Although Israel has been successful, the casualties are painful. The militant Hezbollah group in Lebanon says it's begun destroying surveillance cameras at several Israeli army outposts along the border. Hezbollah's military media arm released a video showing snipers shooting and destroying surveillance cameras installed at 5 locations along the Lebanese-Israeli border, including one outside the Israeli town of Metula. The militant group appears to want to prevent the Israeli army from monitoring movements on the Lebanese side of the border. Tensions on the Lebanese-Israeli border are growing by the hour. Hezbollah militants fired anti-tank missiles at Israeli army positions. Israeli troops shelled border areas on the Lebanese side of the border. Israel and Hezbollah are bitter enemies who fought a month-long war in the summer of 2006. Israel sees the Hezbollah militant group as its most serious immediate threat. It's estimated that Hezbollah has about 150,000 rockets and missiles targeting Israel. There are concerns that Hezbollah could join the war with Israel. Earlier this month, US President Joe Biden warned other players in the Middle East not to join the conflict. The US has sent American warships to the region and pledged full support for Israel. Hassan Fadallah, who sets the rules for the Hezbollah militant group, said the group was ready for all eventualities. Fadallah said that we don't want to reveal what the next step is. Fadallah said that Hezbollah's next step is linked to what is happening in Gaza. France's top diplomat described the tense situation on the Lebanese-Israeli border as worrying and dangerous. The diplomat called for restraint after talks with caretaker Prime Minister Najib Mikati, Parliament Speaker Nabi Berri, and Chief of Staff General Joseph Aoun. French Foreign Minister Catherine Colonna made the following statement at a press conference at the French Embassy Pine residence. We are here to reaffirm our relationship and our support for Lebanon, and say that it is unacceptable for any party or group to be dragged into a war or into what is happening in Gaza. Mikati's office said Colonna endorsed an Egyptian proposal for a meeting between Arab leaders and permanent members of the United
Siddhant, coming to you now, another thing that we've been discussing so far, and we discussed this yesterday as well, you got us voices from the families of those who've been taken hostage by Hamas. Where is the situation right now? Has there been any plan of action with regards to the hostage situation?
Well, the hostage situation is a worrisome situation here in Israel. Almost on a daily basis, we have seen protests by the family members of the people who have been kidnapped and hostages and kept as hostage by Hamas. And in this city, in Tel Aviv, we have seen pictures across the city posted on cars, on trees, anywhere you look at, and also yellow ribbons as a show of support to the family members of hostages. Yesterday, we were at one of the protests and we saw people breaking down as well. But nonetheless, that puts a lot of pressure on the Netanyahu government for an early release of the hostages. We know that the Israeli government has linked the release of the hostages with the humanitarian support. They have clearly said that when it comes to sending humanitarian support to Israel, from Israel to Gaza, that's not going to happen unless there is some movement on the release of the hostages. So that is something that is the top priority of the Israeli government, and the Israeli government is leaving no stone unturned to make sure that there is a release of hostage as soon as possible. But with each passing day, there is a hope that is diminishing and concerns increasing for the family members, and that is why they are getting anxious and they're calling on their government to make sure that some kind of action is taken for the release of their loved ones.
All right. Well, Siddhant, thank you so much for bringing us the latest on this from Israel. Also, Mr. Omar Barghouti, thank you so much for joining us on Beyond with all your insights and perspective on this.
US President Joe Biden, on a visit to Israel, bucked his allies' stance, blaming Hamas militants for a rocket strike on a hospital that killed hundreds in war-torn Gaza and has inflamed anger across West Asia. The Hamas militant group blamed the blast on an Israeli airstrike, while the Israeli military claimed a rocket was misfired by the militants. Our correspondent Silvan Sibor reports.
Charred vehicles and belongings scattered in front of Gaza's al-Arabi hospital, obliterated in what Hamas claims was an Israeli airstrike that took 500 lives.
There was no body before the hospital was started. There were about 3,000 who were taken safety. While they were working at the hospital and without any warning, around 6:30 p.m., the hospital was targeted by shelling.
Gazans combed through the debris, collecting the bodies of the dead in the battered enclave. In besieged Gaza, the hospital blast stoked fresh horrors after 12 days of sustained bombardment that Israel says targeted Hamas and has destroyed entire city blocks. In a bid to diffuse tensions, President Joe Biden arrived in Tel Aviv, embracing the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and offering solidarity.
I was deeply saddened and outraged by the explosion at the hospital in Gaza yesterday. And based on what I've seen, it appears as though it was done by the other team, not you. But there's a lot of people out there who are not sure. So we've got to overcome a lot of things.
That is how close the US president came to giving a clean chit to Israel, but the horror of the hospital deaths threatened to derail his high-stakes visit to the region. Jordan canceled the summit between King Abdullah II, Biden, Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas, and Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi. The Arab world is furious. Angry rallies were held in Lebanon, Jordan, Libya, Yemen, Tunisia, Turkey, Morocco, Iran, and the Israeli-occupied West Bank. The United Arab Emirates and Bahrain, which both established ties with Israel in the Abraham Accords of 2020, condemned Israel for the hospital attack. Egypt called the deliberate bombing a clear violation of international law, while Saudi Arabia said it was a heinous crime committed by the Israeli forces. The Israeli army said it has evidence that militants were responsible for the blast that killed hundreds at a Gaza hospital. Hamas refuted the claim.
Intelligence from few sources that we have in our hands indicates that the Islamic Jihad is responsible for the failed rocket launch which hit the hospital in Gaza.
Shock over the hospital strike could well undermine the wider purpose of Biden's visit, even as the Israel-Hamas war threatens to spread to the wider West Asia. With Siddhant Sibal in Tel Aviv, your report, we are World is One.
The anger over the hospital explosion could meanwhile undermine the wider purpose of President Biden's visit, even as he tries to prevent the Israel-Hamas war engulfing the wider West Asian region.
Let's talk more about this. Sidhan Subor is our principal diplomatic correspondent. He's joining us live from Tel Aviv. And also Farhat Mantu, the executive director of Doctors Without Borders South Asia, is joining us from Geneva. Welcome both to the program. Sidhan Subor, I will begin with you. Busy day in Tel Aviv and strong statements from both the US President and the Prime Minister of Israel. We also understand the Jordan trip has been cancelled. The president's trip was overshadowed by
Second story, you'll find this office. His name is Pedro. Just give him the note.
Essentially, the US president will shortly leaving this city where I am standing. We have seen all throughout the day he has been talking about the bravery of Israel, the people of Israel, and talking about the Palestinians as well. But clearly, pointing out that Hamas is the terror. It is an organization that doesn't represent the Palestinians. And he talked about how the United States is going to stand with Israel in whatever be the global environment. We know that the American assets are already there in the region. But essentially, so far, one thing I can point out, I haven't heard any silence or any of the attacks on this city or perhaps large parts of Israel. That's maybe because
Go give it to him, right?
is here in Israel. Maybe one of
It's ready, sir.
the person who is impacted by the terror
It's ready.
So welcome to beyond.
Of course, let him get away from the sun. He knows what he's doing. Yeah, everything went smoothly for before we start. I would like to give you this.
She's holding shotguns outside the room that she's staying over there in Nachalos kibbutz. And that's it. This is the last time that we've heard of her. And 2 days later, we found some small video that shows us that the girl was captured by Hamas, taken hostage to try to
understand that. We appreciate it.
Two of them was
A lot of
women.
people like you.
One of them was not. All of them was handcuffed. And that's it. She's over there probably. We find her mobile. We try to track her mobile and we find it in Gaza.
Sir, do you expect the visit of the US president somehow providing a diplomatic solution? Do you expect that this will resolve the hostage issue and your niece will be able to come back and meet you?
Well, I hope very much that, he's the President of the United States. We have a lot of power. We can push all other countries to try to compete together, to combine together, and try to do something about this. Try to push I know that Saudi Arabia, and, Oman, and Qatar are very involved with Hamas group. They get a lot of money from them, a lot of support. So I hope that something will happen about this. We are trying to push our government because she's responsible for our, security here in Israel. She has to do it. We'd like to get our children back. She's together with another 200 people over there. Some of them are very, very young, like 3 years old, 3 months old. And the older one is like 85 years old. It's unbelievable that you can catch this kind of people and take them hostage for no reason. For no reason.
Well, thank you so much, sir, for speaking to Beyond and giving us a ground view of the situation. So, here in this city, a number of protests have happened today with family members hoping that their voice will be heard. You can see a view behind me. This is the view right now. It's approximately here 5:40 p.m. and you can see that the family members are still gathered here and with the posters trying to create awareness over the situation of their loved ones and they have been since morning stationed in this very place. So the message is clear from the people here, the loved ones of those who have been kidnapped, that they want their loved ones very soon with them.
All right, that is our principal diplomatic correspondent, Sidhan Subor, live in Tel Aviv. Farhat, thank you very much for staying on and thank you for talking to me on One today. We are receiving disturbing reports coming in from Gaza. Give us a sense of the situation on the ground from your fellow doctors in Gaza. According to reports, there were patients and even doctors among those who were killed at a hospital which was hit What's the need of the hour?
Thank you for having me on the show. The situation in Gaza on the ground continues to be chaotic, catastrophic. As per WHO, since October 7, we have documented 57 attacks on health facilities, health workers, and ambulances. This also includes two hospitals that MSF is supporting on the ground. So, to share with you, we have more than 300 staff that is in Gaza at this point of time, both Palestinian police as well as international staff, and all they are looking for is safety while doing their medical work. So the teams on the ground, it is getting more and more difficult to have access to them because of the electricity cutout, as well as the internet and phone networks being extremely patchy. So for us, the first thing is to see the safety of our staff in such an environment where there is no safe space to go.
Farhat, what kind of aid or even medicine is urgent at this moment in Gaza? And when it comes to warnings or even notices, how do your colleagues receive them? Where will they go and what's MSF doing about that?
Like I already told you that we are like equally impacted personally in this situation because all the exit points out of Gaza are blocked. So that would mean that our teams are trying as much as possible to continue working, but also some have moved on towards the southern part of Gaza. And we are waiting for one of the checkpoints to be opened up for our staff who are willing to leave, but at the same time also bring in emergency supplies and emergency staff and teams who can operate and because the flow of patients is non-stop. And what I hear from surgeons, because a surgeon can very well understand what I'm talking about, the surgeries are being conducted without painkillers. So imagine a surgeon doing a surgery without a painkiller. What does that mean? So that is one of the very small glimpse of what our teams are experiencing on the ground. Next to that, it is that from last many days, Israel has been putting out the evacuation from hospitals as something as consistently over these years, over these days, sorry. And where we are looking at this evacuation to where and evacuation, if we talk about all these hospitals, what are we talking about? We're talking about patients who are on ventilators, patients who are in ICU, burn victims, trauma victims, newly-born babies, pregnant women, trauma victims. So to move from to be evacuated from one hospital to another, the other hospital needs to have the capacity to be able to manage that. Next to that, we have heard that ambulances have been attacked, and that would mean that nowhere there is safety for our staff as well as civilians in this context.
All right, we're talking to Farhat Mantur. She is the Executive Director of Doctors Without Borders South Asia. Farhat, pass our regards to your colleagues in Gaza and thank you for talking to me on One is One today. Siddhant, coming back to you, both Egypt and Jordan have said, quote, it will be very dangerous for us to open the crossing or border points. This is the only way out for thousands, and we have been reporting about an imminent ground invasion for some time now. What are you hearing about that in Israel?
Well, there are many things to do if Israel does a ground invasion. Now, when we know that the Israeli actions in Gaza could lead to a humanitarian crisis, this is something that the world has talked about. And essentially, on the ground, the Israeli side has been saying that it is acting on Hamas hideouts and hoping there will be a release in terms of the hostages as well. Situation has deteriorated progressively in terms of the people in Gaza. All in all, what we can expect is that in next few days there can be some kind of diplomatic solution. The U.S. president is here in this city. He has spoken to the leadership here, but will he able to make sure that the crisis diffuses is the big question.
principal diplomatic correspondent Sidhan Sibol live in Tel Aviv. Sidhan Sibol, stay safe.
And world leaders have called for a thorough probe into what caused the explosion at the Al Ali hospital that killed hundreds of people. Now the blast is drawing condemnation from across the Arab world. Several protesters rallied across West Asia condemning the attack against unarmed and defenseless people. In West Bank, protesting Palestinians set barricades on fire. Palestinian security forces in Ramallah fired tear gas and pounded grenades to disperse the protesters. Amidst the protest, the Palestinian Health Ministry reported that the Israeli forces even shot dead 2 Palestinian teenagers. This as the two sides have blamed each other for the explosion on the hospital. In Lebanon, over 100 protesters gathered near the US Embassy in Beirut carried Palestinian flags to show their solidarity with the victims of the attack. The protesters waved Palestinian flags, brought out security